We'll get us started. Welcome, welcome. I am Michael Taylor. I am the program coordinator here at Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration. Today's conversation with the Prison Programming Providers Table is what does supporting programming look like? This quarter's conversation is a little bit different than we usually have. As providers, advocates, educators, peers, and practitioners, we spend a significant amount of time navigating barriers, delays, access limitations, staffing shortages, facility culture, funding instability, the works, right? And while these challenges are real, this conversation is going to ask us to step back and think a little bit more broadly. I want us to, like I said a few minutes ago, is do some vision casting. I want you to be thinking if Michigan truly prioritized rehabilitation, healing, growth, and transformation, what would programming actually look like? Mm. The answer to that question is going to require for us to actually get into separate groups and have some conversations and really get to know one another. And I think by taking a more creative and visionary stance, we may be able to uncover some strategies that are already in our faces. Some stuff that we are probably overlooking because we've been looking. You ever heard the term "you can't see the forest for the trees"? It's like the trees are right in your face, and therefore you don't even get to see the whole landscape and avenues that may be right there available to you because you're looking at the tree that's right in front of you. So rather than do that, I want to take us a little bit past that, up into the sky, and look over the whole outlook. That said, though, because it's been a while, I want to give a few people a little breakdown of MI-CEMI. So, a little bit about MI-CEMI. We are a statewide collaborative, um, non non what is it, partisan, non-religion, the way I like to describe it is we are people, organizations, and movements that are all working together in order to end mass incarcerations. Right now, we have approximately 125 member organizations, as well as who knows how many individual members, both incarcerated and out here in the free world. Um, Next slide, please, Chuck. What we work on here at MI-CEMI. So we work in four main buckets. That is prevention, the improving public safety and preventing incarceration, sentencing, reducing length of stay and ending excessive prison sentences, programming, which brings us here today, where we discuss expanding quality and access to programming in prison and other rehabilitative activities, and then reentry, improving supports and removing barriers to successful reentry. A couple of our, I guess, like sub pillars that I like to call our narrative change, being able to change the dialogue on criminal legal issues to promote a safe, fair, and cost effective justice system. And then reinvestment, taking some of those funds that come from divesting from some of these other areas and putting that back into the people, back into the community. So that's what MI-CEMI works on. And we do a lot of work stretching ourselves to touch people in every area. But that's a little bit about MI-CEMI. The goals for this programming table is one, to connect. Of course, we are trying to build and deepen relationships among people who provide programming inside facilities and with the broader criminal legal advocacy community. Peer support is always about that. Collective action, working together to address common challenges and broader advocacy, being able to connect programming providers with broader systems change advocacy. Tap it one time for me, Chuck. And the biggest pillar in this part is confidentiality. In general, when we do these meetings, we ask that the lessons leave, but the stories stay. We don't want to be walking out of here telling people's personal stories, but the lessons learned from these stories are more than welcome to leave. That being said, we usually have a clause where we add even that we don't ask certain members of MDLC or law enforcement to participate. But in this one, I believe it would be valuable for all participants that are here to be included. So just keep in mind that confidentiality is a serious one here in this space. Next slide, Chuck. And our agenda for today, of course, I just told you a little bit about MI-CEMI and about the prison programming providers table. Today, I also have asked a guest to come speak to us briefly, and he's going to answer a couple of questions based on like his perspective the work that he's doing at the organization he's at, and what they're doing towards, or what they're doing to lend towards answering these questions. And that is, what does a robust programming environment look like? And the other question is, what are the largest barriers to meaningful access? Those questions are, and we're going to be centered in this conversation by, I don't know what to call you at this point, man. You done became a brother of mine, a close ally of mine, but the brother, Hakeem Crampton from Citizens for Prison Reform will level set us and give us a grounding in what does robust prison programming look like. And even before we get there, um, I also wanted to acknowledge the goals for today's conversation. And those goals are to take a creative and visionary approach to thinking about prison programming and systematic change or system transformation, explore what is possible beyond current barriers, policies, and limitation, identify innovative ideas, strategies, and opportunities that may be helpful, that may already be within our reach, help MI-CEMI, us, identify future topics for convenings, learning communities, and working groups, and strengthen connections between participants, organizations, and system stakeholders. That said, without further ado, I want to do a full introduction to my brother Hakeem Crampton. So let me read this bio, bro, because when I read it, I was like, yes, this is the guy. This is who I needed to ground us on this. So Hakeem Crampton is the government legislative liaison for Citizens for Prison Reform. Hakeem Crampton is an award-winning poet, author, national juvenile justice and youth violence prevention specialist, and motivational speaker from Jackson, Michigan. He emerged as a prisoner rights advocate while serving a 45-year sentence stemming from a 1991 wrongful arrest and conviction. 15 years later, Hakeem won his freedom with the assistance of the Wisconsin Innocence Project. Today, he serves as the government legislative liaison for Citizens for Prison Reform, where he works to advance policies that support rehabilitation, second chances, and meaningful criminal justice reform. Now, before we got on the line, or before we went live, I was talking to Hakeem about the surreal feeling of being in this position after having served 15 years for myself. And I was saying, like, man, I didn't even see this for myself. And I asked him about himself. He said, you know what? Well, I kind of did see this path for myself because I had been working while in prison with nonprofit organizations, and we had been working towards this thing. And that really struck not struck a nerve, but a bell went off in my mind. Was like, that sounds a lot closer to what we're trying to get to here in Michigan when it comes to aligning programming with the people inside and being able to make a smoother transition between the two. That being said, Citizens for Prison Reform has been working on something behind the scenes that um, not many people know about, but I think it will affect many. And I like the premise of it. So I want you to, before we even get into the questions, level set us on what you're working on with the right to rehabilitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me, MI-CEMI, and thank you to each of you that are on this call. It's a great honor to continue to work in this space with people like us that have such a entrenched lived experience and are committed and dedicated to this work, to advancing what we were impacted by, to advancing what we knew and saw to be gaps, but we had no capacity to fill those gaps, especially while we are incarcerated. So, like all of you, or many of you, I'm sure most of you probably were incarcerated or have some form of connection, and which has brought you to this work. While I was incarcerated, I was away from home. I'm from Michigan, but I was locked up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I was away from home. I was away from understanding what the opportunity looked like for incarceration. What was I going to do while I was in prison? I didn't have any support network close enough by. So while there, I understood that, for one, we're sent to prison allegedly to be rehabilitated. We're sent to prison allegedly to keep us safe from society. And so that, of course, upon our return to society, we should consider to be safe. We should be safer, right? What I realized, of course, was that that wasn't going to happen if I didn't change who I was. I wasn't going to be a safer person, even though I went to prison for a crime I didn't commit. I realized that I wasn't going to be a safer person in society unless I took the initiative while I was there to get what I needed that would help me, sustain me, and move me toward my reentry so that when I did return, I would be successful. So I did that while I was incarcerated because most of you know there's lack of program, lack of services, lack of opportunity for people in prison. So an organization like Citizens for Prison Reform, which I now work for, really fulfills a big needed gap that I witnessed while I was incarcerated. And that was them understanding that people who are incarcerated should be rehabilitated, right? That if a loved one, if you are someone, you have a loved one, they go to prison, your greatest hope for them is to, man, I can't wait till you get home to show us the greatness that was already in you, that we knew that you made some mistakes and some things were happening out here in the world and you found yourself incarcerated. And now you're there, and unfortunately, you might have to be there for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Unfortunately, some people might have to be there longer. But while you're there, you're safe. You get the program, the services, the things you need, the treatment, and you come back to our society, back to our family, back to our community, a thriving, revived individual. Like that's the ideal model that families think that should happen when we go to prison, and we know that that's not the reality. So, Citizens for Prison Reform is really concerned with understanding that, wait a minute, people who are in prison should have the right to rehabilitation. Not only the right to rehabilitation, but the right to rehabilitation should be a legislated law because it's legislated for them to take your freedom and to assess and evaluate you while you're in prison, to say you need these programs, et cetera, for you to be released. But yet while you're in prison, while we're in prison, we found out that we're not getting access to programs and services and the treatment, the things we need. So we recognize that the right to rehabilitation really just doesn't exist inside the prison system, that some people could access rehabilitation, could get on a list and qualify for a program, but there will be many hundreds, many thousands who would end up doing their time the hard way, right? Survival, just trying to survive while they're there. No meaningful engagement for treatment services, no meaningful engagement for education, vocation, et cetera. The things that are needed to acquire while we're there, the things we evidently might not have had that end up leading us to prison. Why aren't we getting those things while we're there? We know the system isn't set up to give us that. So we have been advancing some work in that area. Like we don't have the full solution to this because we recognize that this is a big, huge gap. It's bigger than what we had envisioned to address the issue. So immediately we jumped in and said, well, we got to do something for now until, we have the full solution. But right now, what we understood was that people didn't have access to programs. People had to wait in long lines, prioritize lines that would prioritize people with the shortest amount of time prior to people with the longest amount of time. And that meant that if I came in prison with a 30-year sentence, I'm eventually going to go home, right? But I got to wait 15, 20, 25 years before any rehabilitative services really firmly offered to me, particularly rehabilitative services that would qualify me for my release through parole, right? I may end up doing 26, 27 years, get the parole, and they say, hey, you didn't do any of the programs that you were supposed to do while you were here. And all I can say is they weren't available to me at that time. That's all I can say. Instead, the institution should be liable for me saying they were unavailable to me. But instead, they're not being held accountable for my right to be rehabilitated. So that by the time I reach my parole capacity or my ability to be released, I've actually gone through programming. I've actually received services and treatment, right? Received vocational, workforce development. I'm prepped and prepared for my reentry. That's not the case. So we realized that that's what we needed to do, was step into that space, into that zone. We created what's called the Rehabilitative Justice Project. And right now we're working out of Ingham County Jail. We have a city, we started with a city grant, a pilot grant last year that folded into a county grant that's going to take us back into the county this year. So last year's pilot program, what it does is it allows us to actually provide and produce and deliver a program service available to people incarcerated who may not have a program available for them. So we partnered with ACCI. ACCI is the American Community Corrections Institute, and they have a plethora of evidence-based programs like cognitive behavior, domestic violence, commercial driver responsibility, marijuana education, all kinds of programs. Programs that deal with retail theft and things of that nature. They're evidence-based programs, but the beauty about them is that they're self-directed. So they allow a person to have access to program at any given time. It's a book that comes through the mail, be distributed through the program services. And how we've built this program is that we didn't just come to the institution and say, hey, you guys can qualify for a program that you normally don't qualify in jail, and we'll send you the books. We don't just leave it there. In all actuality, we go into the system. We do group sessions, right? We do group sessions with them all. We do a lot of level setting, introduce the program, introduce rehabilitation, like what it really is, not what rehabilitation is according to the system, but what we know what it means for people with lived experience who've done the work, who rehabilitated ourselves, who's taken the initiative. Then we assign them, we don't assign them, we allow them to choose a program of their own choice that corresponds to programming that they find necessary to them. If they feel, hey, I got an issue with domestic violence and I would like to take the domestic violence program, that can be one they choose. It could be cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, it could be that. They chose them. Then as they're going through that program, we have weekly coaching sessions with them. So they're via Zoom. The weekly coaching sessions are via Zoom, and we kind of do a wraparound services that supports them while they're incarcerated, but we also connect with their families. So we have a family participation component to that. So what we also offer is that while they're going through one of their ACCI books, that the family member can also choose to go through the same book. So they're learning the same thing at the same time and kind of be in sync with each other and be able to be supportive of each other in that process. And like I said, it's not the full-on solution to the lack of programs that are available, but it's the initial step that we understood that we could have an impact if we have people sitting in county jail 8, 9 months. Sometimes people are down there 2 years. No real programs, no real services, no real engagement, especially if they're going to ultimately be sentenced to prison. If they're in pretrial detention. So if they happen to be sent to prison, then in fact, they need to be prepped and prepared for that with some real engagement from people like us. And we found that our pilot program was extraordinarily powerful. The feedback we received was unbelievable. People were just like, wow, this is changing their lives. They never thought on this level before because they had never had people like us, formerly incarcerated, who've been through everything that they're going through, come in there and support them in their program, the services, the treatment that they need to become better people, right? So that became our solution, the
Yes, sir.
Rehabilitative Justice Project.
Yeah, so you actually led up to the major question that I wanted to talk about before we transition into breakout rooms, and that is actually the second part. I think you did a pretty good job in talking about what does robust programming look like when it comes to this thing, starting in county jail and leading up through it. But I think what I'm interested in now is what are the largest barriers to meaningful access from your perspective?
Yeah. So before I highlight some of those barriers, let me pin this right with the leading into the barriers that. So a part of robust programming, of course, isn't just having access to a program, but in all actuality, incarceration is a long-term impact. Even if you just do a year, 3 years, 6 months, there's a long-term impact of that. So that means that people experiencing incarceration who happen to be going through programs that are going to benefit them, the program needs to be offered not only to them directly, but as we mentioned, we offer it to their family as well. So there's a wraparound support component to that. So that's happening while they're incarcerated, right? They're getting what they need while they're incarcerated with the support system already on the outside, already happening with the family participation piece. And it's kind of a part of our participatory defense piece because when someone has a loved one that is experiencing court process and they come into our program, we immediately not only support the family member with a loved one incarcerated, but then we jump into supporting the loved one who is incarcerated by offering them the program. So, part of a robust program means that the family members are also a part of the program. That it's not just offered to them, but the family members know about the program. They can participate in the program, and then they're undergoing the program. But then that program needs to also be supportive upon reentry, right? So while
Yes.
they're leaving the institution or exiting the institution, there's a plan for how they're going to continue with their treatment, with their education, with their vocation, whatever it is that they was receiving while they were there. It's a continuation of it, continuation of the plan, of the treatment plan, the services plan, et cetera. The next step, if you got your associate's degree in the institution, what's the plan to get your bachelor's degree upon release? Who do you need to connect with? Those various things, that's all part of the programming, which makes it a real robust program. But that
Mhm.
leads into the barriers, right? Because we know that many people incarcerated, whether in a county jail or an actual prison, they don't necessarily have unfettered access to just do those things right there, right? Especially when the rehabilitative justice program that we're offering a program that it's what's called self-directed. They can access it at 24 hours. Their families are involved in the program, and there's a supportive plan for transition upon release, whether they were in 5 years or 10 years. There's still something happening with the program as it is evolving. Like I said, you may take an associate's course while you're in an institution. Maybe leading to a bachelor's and a master's program. Well, those things are all needs to be unfettered. The access, has to be there. We find that the institutions with them, it starts with the court system. So the court system, generally what happens is people who are sentenced to incarceration, generally their social bio, their pre-sentence doesn't always consider what program and services and treatment they need. So that becomes the first barrier. If treatment courts isn't involved, like almost every case, not all cases, but almost every case should have a treatment aspect to it, because many of people who go to prison, we know this, have some form of treatment, substance, or psychological mental health issue in place that is never truly addressed, never addressed at the court level. So that becomes the first barrier when that's missed in the court level, when the appropriate pre-sentence social bio isn't evidenced and evaluated. So when I go to prison, it's known what my needs are, what programs I'm going to need. So that becomes the first barrier when we don't have proper treatment services at the court level happening before we get to incarceration. Then when we get to incarceration, what we're finding, as I mentioned earlier, is that there's a prioritization. The institution feels that if someone is about to be released, the earlier they are about to be released, that they are the ones that are prioritized for programs. We think that's extraordinarily backwards. And let me explain why. It's backwards because people coming in with long-term sentences, these are the people who are going to set the tone for the prison environment. These are the people who, if I'm coming in with 3 years, you're the one that's going to set the tone for how I'm going to do my time, because you're doing 20 and 30 years. So you have the chance to build the culture and the environment in the institution for someone like me, right, who's just coming from the street. So me going home in 3 years, I'm closer to reentry, coming in than you are, and you're going to do 15, 20 years. So you need to be prioritized prior to me so that you can help create a better environment while I'm there. But that's not happening because the institution, of course, is warehousing people. They don't offer enough programs. There's not enough services, and they're not giving access to institutions and organizations that would be on the street, that would operate in the community, that could offer services from the community inside the institution, operate the program in the institution, and then transition to the outside where there's continued wraparound reentry support services for the programming. That doesn't exist inside our correctional institutions. And as a matter of fact, the MDOC denied us with our rehabilitative justice program in terms of being supported by them. They said, well, yeah, you can do the program. You'll have to do it on your own. You have to make contact with people inside. And if they want to take your program, they can. But we're not going to support you and say, build up a support system to offer it to the institution and say, hey, there's an organization out in the community offering a program. If you're interested, here's the information. They're not doing that. So that's a big barrier. There's also, once again, a post-incarceration barrier because if a person plans, there's not a successful plan leading to reentry at an adequate time, then we're going to miss the entirety of the progressiveness of what needs to take place because your reentry needs to start upon entering the institution. And that reentry needs to be a long-term plan for reentry. So you're coming in and there's no plan. Programs are assigned to you that you may not get for 15, 20 years, 7 years, or you may not get. So there's no real streamlined plan to progressively program you through the system. So no wonder when people are finally offered a program after doing 18 years in prison, psychologically, what they've experienced, the trauma of survival in the institution, right? Because the institution is volatile. They're not even going to benefit necessarily from the reentry services and program because it's not long enough to be progressive enough to grow with them mentally, psychologically, emotionally, etc. So those are the big barriers that we see happening with regard to access to programs while inside.
Man, I appreciate that, Hakeem. You really laid that out, bro. But before we get there, Chuck, can you share the slides so that I could give some upcoming events? Because we always get to the upcoming events at the very end and people have to leave for work and do other things. So I wanted to make sure and let you know what was coming up for MI-CEMI and for some of our partners across the state before we get to that last part. So first and foremost, make sure you go and visit the MI-CEMI website to get a full list of upcoming events. But right here in the meantime, in between time, come back next week, June 24th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. We'll be doing the MI-CEMI Communications convening to explore documentary storytelling and narrative change. Now, this is going to be a special one. We have Dr. Yusuf Buncher Shakur from the Michigan Roundtable for Just Communities, as well as Cole Williams from the Delta Project, both talking about documentaries that they put together, distributed themselves, and are um, strong, powerful stories. Different angles, but like really powerful stories. I can't wait for you guys to be a part of that one. So please come back for that one. Also, September 1st from 12 to 1:30 p.m., we will be doing this again, our quarterly prison program and providers table. The topic will be determined based on what the conversation from today is. So, like I said, even if you were not able to get through all of your prompts in order to get the answers, I will be following up because this conversation, the meat of this conversation, is going to guide us as we move forward in our learning communities. And then September 17th from 12 to 1:30, we will be doing our communications roundtable with a short breaking down short form video in line with our storytelling and narrative change conversation. So, and if there are any other events that you would like us to announce in our upcoming programs, make sure you send them to mail@mycemi.org. Thank you for sharing that slide, Chuck. Um, oh, well, I'll share the next steps after we get done with this conversation. So, there's a slide up for share outs and major themes. Um, Now, I just want to hear from the groups, kind of where you guys landed, where the conversations landed. So I think I'm gonna start with group one. I know we asked for somebody to be the facilitator and a note taker. I didn't necessarily ask for a speaker from your group. So I'm asking if somebody from the groups be willing to stand up and kind of speak out, or not necessarily one person. If there are a couple people that were in the group that would like to kind of summarize the conversation that was had in each group, I'd like to start. I'll open up the floor for that now, and it don't have to go on like any order. Group one, group two. This is a conversation for us all. So, Lita, I see your hand first.
So, some of the discussions that we had in our group, we had Gerald talking about the fact that rehabilitation needs to start immediately before they're entering the facilities. Again, when we're spending $40,000 a year, possibly taking some of that money while they are phasing out and allowing them to have access to financial stability so that they can have all the resources that they need. We had Dr. Caldwell talk about the access that continues to be limited in these facilities and the need for more access to these programs. We had Masha talk about the lack of knowledge, lack of advocacy for some of the resources and these programs in the facilities. We've had a discussion about having an ombudsman model for an advocate specifically for some of these programs. Somebody that would almost be like a liaison to the administration of these facilities as well as to the inmates. And also we had, sorry if I'm saying this wrong, Kiwana, as a reminder for mass incarceration needs to start at the court level, and the reduction in criminalizing mental health has to start within the legislation itself. And yeah, I think that's pretty much what we had.
The good points, especially in the mass incarceration at the court level, um, like starting there versus trying to end with reentry and uh, come back. I like that. Appreciate that, leader. Anybody else had any shares from that group? No? What about group two or another group? Anybody ready to share out from your group what you came up with? What your conversation land on? Any major points?
Were we group two? I think.
Mary Lynn, I think you
Yeah.
guys
Do
were.
you guys want me to do it since I have the notes? Or not? Or somebody
Yes,
else, people
please.
just want to jump in and I'll finish up
Yeah,
what we don't cover.
you have the notes, Marilyn. Go ahead.
All right, okay. So what is needed for support? First of all, everyone, funding was at everybody's top of every list. Funding and capacity needed for staff. So many ideas and so much good energy and just not enough, financial resources to do it. So that was a big deal. Also talked about less siloing, less unproductive overlap. There's, one of the glories of all this is we have lots of small, grassroots groups doing great stuff, but sometimes there is overlap. So just people pushing, it said a good thing is to support lots of networking across the nonprofits. A couple of kudos to these sessions and to MI-CEMI for doing this kind of thing, taking advantage of collective wisdom. Said back to the money part a little bit, that all programming shouldn't need to be done for free. There ought to be ways to pay folks. At the same time, we want to honor the expertise of the very high level volunteers who do programming. Another big need, institutional support from the MDOC facility staff and so on, both when program is happening and when it's not happening, like for things like school where there needs to be continuous effort. If there were support on the inside, that would be terrific. And then we talked about we've talked about this in other sessions of this, but the need to change the policy of no communication with program participants. That has been changed for some of the college programs, but there are lots of programming that goes on where there could be a lot of benefit from people, people having communication back and forth with the folks they're working with, and it just doesn't happen. And we need to have as in many things, have the facility look at the good things that could happen and grow from that rather than the worst things that could happen. All of a sudden my notes have disappeared, but I know what they say anyway. There we go. Then we switched to what the facilities need. We talked about better staffing, better training. We talked about the need to try to bridge the gap between prison internal culture and program providers. Even though we wish they didn't have to, they didn't feel this way, that we have to give the facility the ability to express their reasons and fears over the policy changes that we're asking for. Aaron mentioned that for Grand Valley, there are, in their programs, they've noticed some core groups of a few COs seeing benefits of college programs, even for their own safety and the safety of the population. talked about there have been a few small startup efforts for college programs that include for staff as well as for inside the prison, that is for COs and so on. There's been a few small starts and efforts, nothing sustained yet, but people are aware of that gap. Um, and asking that people who diss college and prison as too good for criminals, or I've got to go to prison to go to college, remembering that those opportunities didn't exist for many people back at home, and what a good benefit it is for folks when they get out. So um, that's about it. We talked went back to funding a little bit, training people inside to help with funding. Conrad Cole told us a little bit about his retreat, and then we kind of fizzled with time.
One thing that as we were finishing the session, I think Jennifer was in the middle of suggesting that the nonprofits are all seeking funding from the same sources, and
Right.
maybe there would be a way to coordinate. Maybe MI-CEMI could help with that. Coordinate so that they're not all competing for the same funds.
That's a good one. I like that,
Yes,
Mary
thank
Ann.
you.
Kiwana, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to go back a little bit with what I believe it's Mary was summarizing from her group. I liked your point about the gap, bridging this gap between the culture of the environment internally and the programming, because we touched on that when we discussed the staffing issues that I think a lot of people don't seemingly want to talk about. But I was so thankful for Dr. Cotwell's inclusion to that conversation and the affirmation that there are some definite staffing issues, not just the shortness, but just the way they cooperate with the incarcerated individuals. We have the very mean ones, and of course, we have the people that are manipulating the incarcerated individuals for advances, for favors. And then we just have those who don't care at all, or those who might be related to a person that an incarcerated individual may be offended. So that's a very, very critical, necessary component to any program development. And that's why with Marcia, I apologize if I'm getting the person wrong, but the woman who mentioned this ombudsman type figure, very, very necessary. My son's talking. Bye.
I feel that. I feel that. And I think this is the group I jumped in, and there was a little bit of conversation about volunteers versus being paid to come in and do programming and the level of professionalism. So that was a really interesting part of the conversation as well. Mary Lynn, you said something that's going to stick with me for sure, and that is the unproductive overlap. That one is really an issue that I definitely appreciated you highlighting that. So thank you for that. Um, Last but definitely not least, group three. I'm interested in hearing some share outs from what you guys had conversation about. Any volunteers? Now, y'all had a lit group. I went in there a couple times and listened to the conversation. Nobody wants to be the speaker from that group.
I can report out, but I'm not going to be able to report out and transcribe at the same time. Um, so some of our discussion talked about how the department is not supporting third-party programs, so they seem to be withdrawing support. It built on what Hakeem was sharing in his initial remarks, but we've also seen, for example, the Unitarian Universalist program at Women's Huron Valley seeing reduction in their ability to support the women there. Ties in with what Kiwan was just saying around the staffing, among other things, but seeing less support from the department there. We also had a discussion around access to virtual programming mod options, what's available for folks to be able to use technology or self-paced, self-directed learning. Again, Hakeem talked about the use of the workbooks with support, but what are the other aspects there? Lois shared a troubling example of where there was a physician from the University of Chicago who was willing to offer diabetes and heart health education, and the department just said no. They're getting all the medical support they need through the medical services. We don't want anybody else in here talking about heart health.
God.
In terms of participants, there was a discussion around how who is eligible for programming is limited. Hakeem talked about how a lot of it's backloaded, but we also discussed how people in higher security levels, level 4 and level 5, don't have access to programming. So how do we help expand access there? Lois lifted up the importance that programming be person-centered and needs-based. Not just a cookie cutter, everybody gets the same thing. What are the needs of the specific person for their programming? Cecilia encouraged us to ask we're hearing from each other here on the outside around what support program participants need. She challenged us to think about what would it look like to have a focus group or similar, get input from people who are currently incarcerated and hear from them on that same prompt. And then Lois also lifted up how um, the programming, since most of the people in prison are coming home, the programming structure and overall prison experience should support them for that return home. And she lifted up the example of I forget which Jackson's JCS, one of the Jackson prisons. The warden said you can either do college in prison or you can have a job. You can't do both. Well, we know in free world, a lot of people are holding down a job and going to school. So that when you set up those false limitations there, it actually makes it harder for somebody to prepare for the realities they'll face coming home. We lifted up, again, similar to what Group 1 said around the staffing issue, how the staffing crisis is a real barrier, both in terms of making it harder to staff the programs, but also when there are those obstructionist staff, like Kiwana lifted up, the department's less willing to address it because they want to
Okay.
keep those
I'll be
warm
done in
bodies there.
5-10 minutes.
So that's the staffing crisis is a consistent issue, and one that probably the best way to resolve is going to have to be by reducing the prison population, letting people come home to ease the strain on the system. And the last point we had, and again, this one comes from Lois as well, is when people are doing these self-directed or third-party programs, the need to make sure that that's part of their parole packet. So when the parole board is reviewing how has somebody changed, what transformation have they gone through, they're not only seeing the tickets, they're not only seeing the formal programming, they're seeing some of the things where people showed their own initiative through the third party and volunteer and peer-led programming. Group 3, what did I miss?
Good summary. Good summary. I did my best to catch the notes too, man. So hey, I'm making strides. We getting there. Um, but yeah, I appreciate that. That's a lot of information actually came from those conversations, and I appreciate um this conversation. How does everybody feel about that? Thumbs up. How y'all feeling about the conversation you just had? So I see Kelly.
Good.
I feel that because sometimes it's like I just dumped all of this shit, and now what's supposed to happen, right? I feel you. So that's a real thing as well. Um, that being said, Chuck, can you lift up the slide for the next steps? Because there are some things that are to be done or that we can do. So, next steps after you leave this room, the very first next step you should have locked in your mind is attending future sessions. Make sure you are coming back and visiting with MI-CEMI so that we can touch base, huddle up, and then ready break back out there. So the next session is September 1st, 12 p.m. The topic will be based on kind of the follow-up of what we did with today. Details and RSVP will be at our website. And of course, I will be reaching out with emails for that information as well. The next thing you can do is tell lawmakers to fund prison educational programming, the Sentencing Commission, and juvenile life for resentencing. There is a bit.ly link right there where you can join in with others who are working on that. And the next thing you can do is invite lawmakers to visit a prison. At CPR's legislative day yesterday, we were able to hear from legislators who are working on bills to make themselves able to go into prisons without notice and without it being like a pre-prompted thing where they are able to, stage the prison. They just want to be able to get in just walking in. So if you are interested in helping that thing go along, mail at MI-CEMI.org. And of course, share your feedback. We have a link at the bottom for you to do a survey to share your feedback on today. Chuck just dropped that survey in the chat, and I think I'm going to follow up with a survey that pertains to that second half of that prompt from today's discussion so I could get if you guys are willing to participate, just get some of that feedback from you that I wasn't able to hear. I will be able to see it and do some work with that. So that being said, thank you all for showing up. Thank you all for coming. So I will see y'all Saturday. And with that being said, again, I appreciate you for showing up and participating and being a part of this good conversation. And I appreciate the work that you all are doing across the state. And I will see you soon. Peace.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for all
Thank
that y'all
you.
do.
Yes, ma'am.